Welcome to episode 6 of the Rest Days Community Podcast. This was the first ever episode recorded with the person who I ran to tell as soon as I had the idea for this podcast. Not only is she one of my closest friends, she is also one of the biggest inspirations in my life. I know so many people find her a source of inspiration. Like all mums, she's a superhero, but her approach to parenting and the thought she puts into being the best mum possible always has me in awe. Like all parents, she is also her own varied person, having lived so many experiences, many of which make her have a lot of rest days related wisdom. So let me introduce the one and only Hetty Kingston, guidebook author, champion for women in the outdoors, endurance cyclist, member of the team that run Peak Gravel Gang, the cycling community, and a really incredible friend. I hope you enjoy her episode. Okay, Hetty, welcome to the Rest Days podcast.
Hi, it's fantastic to be on.
So you've obviously known about this for quite a long time. You were the first person I told about my ideas to get this podcast off the ground, and as soon as I had the idea, I was really keen to talk to you about this. I think most of the themes of this podcast make up the basis of our friendship. So it's really nice to be able to share some of that with the world, and hopefully they can benefit from the chats that we normally have together.
Yeah, it's super exciting that this has kind of come to existence, because right when you first spoke to me about it, I thought, oh, that just sounds like such an amazing idea. So it's incredible to be here, having kind of come through that evolution with you of hearing how it's been growing.
Yeah, I've been super nervous, obviously, recently, trying to get things off the ground. But every single time I tell somebody about it, who I want to be on the podcast, they are really keen on the idea and they straight away seem to resonate with it. And I was pretty sure that this will speak to a lot of people. What do you think, are the things most about this topic of rest days and looking after ourselves that are so important right now?
I think that we live in a world where things are faster, and we're all pushing ourselves, and that's incredible. And there's a huge amount of inspiration out there to go and do really, really cool things, but we're all only human and we all have a finite amount of energy. And I think what's going to be so useful about this podcast is having that balance of inspiration with a healthy dose of self-care, because it's so easy for that just to be completely left behind. And then we find that we can't do the adventures that we love because we've gone and burnt ourselves out. I think a lot of people you speak to, especially in the adventure and outdoor world, they will definitely have had a period at some point where they've overcooked it, whether it's injury, whether it's general fatigue, whether it's post-adventure blues. I think they've all hit at some point for various people.
Yeah, I feel like I'm starting to see it emerging everywhere, and it's becoming a topic we talk about, but then I'm also at the same time still seeing us all battle and make the same mistakes. So I think hopefully through this podcast we can maybe start to finally crack it a little bit and really work out how do we keep pushing forwards but also keep ourselves healthy and sane at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's such a tricky balance, whether it's like for me, I've got 2-year-old twins, and whatever it is that you're trying to balance in life, whether it's work, whether it's family, whether it's other commitments, I think it's really hard to take on board that we need more rest than perhaps we think we do. And it's also hard to feel like you deserve that rest. But I'm really hoping everyone you speak to on this podcast is going to encourage people to take those smaller moments, even if they're only small, to look after themselves and have a rest, because it's so important.
It's interesting as well because we talk about it a lot just in our friendship, but we're so kind to each other. You are always telling me, oh, it's okay if you feel tired, chill out, don't push yourself. And I say the same thing to you, but we're not as good at doing it to ourselves. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's really easy to have standards for yourself that are different to standards you have for the rest of the world. I remember when I think one of us was injured and the other one had been doing loads, and literally our message conversation went along the lines of, I didn't do anything today, and I think you were like, I didn't either, and we literally had to celebrate that as like a real achievement, because I think from a young age I've always been very driven, and this desire to push forward, to better myself, to kind of keep improving, and continual improvement, whether it's like, and I think it's reflected in our conversations, whether it's doing better at work, doing more within the outdoors, whether it's sort of running further or trying a harder mountain bike trail, or even, I think for me, a huge amount is like mental improvement. Like, what can I improve literally within the core of my personality? How can I better who I am as a person? And that drive and that push is definitely continuous. It's not something that I've known or have a natural ability to switch off. I think that's where, like, having honest and real conversations with your friends and trying to take on board what they're saying to you is so important, because I think sometimes it's really inbuilt, this kind of continual forward motion.
And I don't know about you, but I think until I was really properly adulting, I didn't have those kind of friendships that I could do that. I struggled a lot more before because of that. And obviously they're so valuable now. Do you think it's because we're more mature now, we're able to open up to each other to have those proper friendships, or maybe it's just luck that that's when I found those people? I don't know.
Honestly, I think there's higher consequences now. I think, like, when you're in your early 20s and before that, I honestly remember I used to go to work. Then I would finish work, I'd come back. At the time, I did a huge amount of horse riding. So I'd ride my horse, often preparing for a competition or something. I would then go from the horse to the climbing works. And then from the climbing works, I would then go to the pub and socialise with all my friends. And then I would go to bed, and then I'd get up and go to work again the next morning. And it wasn't like, it was an early start. But that just felt completely doable at that point in time. And I think, yes, I think the tell for me is I used to get really ill. I used to be completely fine. And then I'd hit a patch where my body would just go, no, you're not doing any more whatsoever. And it would almost floor me. I didn't listen to my little inbuilt alarm system to tell me to rest until it sort of screamed at me. But I think, being slightly older now, the consequences in a way are a bit higher, because, for example, at work I'm further on, so, you know, I can't afford to have that massive crash and just not do my work for a bit. Equally with the kids, and I just think I'm less tolerant. My body is less tolerant. I don't want to say I'm old, because I don't think I quite fall into that category yet, but I definitely have a lower tolerance to that sort of lifestyle of go, go, go.
Yeah. I also think that I can't tolerate it mentally as much anymore. I think I got fed up of those massive lows that came with my body saying no, and it would stop everything for me. And now I don't think I can mentally cope with that. I just need a bit more stability. I don't know if I'm tired of it or what. I don't have the reserve. Maybe when I was younger I had more energy to pick myself back up again from being knocked back, but I don't seem to have that anymore.
Yeah, I think as well, highs and lows are interesting. I've always been one of these people that, if emotions were a wave, I'm quite choppy and quite big waves. And the high is incredible, but the low is really hard. And I think when you're functioning on that, not higher level, but intenser level, then you're not necessarily I've learned that you're not necessarily helping yourself to steady those waters. And actually, when you live, I don't think it's not less adventurously. There's a real concept that actually by having rest, you're kind of doing less, or you're living less adventurously. I really, really don't think that's the case. I look at what I do now, and I've actually in some ways done bigger things by correctly resting, planning, and then going into a bigger challenge, coming out of it, resting, and then doing another one, than before, when I was almost like throwing it all at the wall and seeing what sticked.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think everybody probably most wants to know, how did you manage to ride an ultra with your two twins? I think is the thing that has brought you the most attention in the last couple of years, and that is possibly a prime example. Somehow you managed to combine being a new mum with going to do this big adventure, and you actually managed to do it. And even I was a doubter at points, and I have so much faith in you, but I still was like, goodness me, how. I think that approach exactly, and the mindset you went into that with, being so different to being, I need to get every last bit of myself out of this, I need to find my limits. You didn't go into it, we went with such a different approach, and then you actually, and then it was a success.
I think I learned when I did, so this is for a race called Dead Ends and Cake, which is an amazing event in Switzerland, and you go to 5 remote checkpoints at the end of gravel roads, and each is a piece of cake So typically people's route is about 500 kilometers with about 9,000 meters of elevation. And I did it back in 2022 and absolutely loved it. And the approach I took there was to ride as much incredible single track as I physically could. My route was 100 kilometers long than pretty much any other participant. I was last, but I knew I had to go back. Cutting a very long story short, somehow in 2024, I was on the start line, but with my 2 twins in the trailer. And I think kudos to race organizer Dominic, because he's the one that kind of said, hey, you know, when I put my entry, I hope you're bringing the twins. I hope, you know, you can be my first trio. And his open-mindedness really inspired me to be able to do it. But going to kind of, I guess, the concept of how I managed to get ready for this and do it, it was those baby steps. And instead of my normal approach of all out, I'm just going to try and aim to get fit enough, I had to take really small steps, mainly for Annie and Flo, but also it taught me that it's a better approach in general. It kind of built me up bit by bit, and just led to having quite an incredible experience. I mean, it was, don't get me wrong, it was super hard. I think that's the other thing people think is, like, if you're resting and you're kind of doing these things, then maybe it's just that you're staying within your comfort zone. This was so far out of my comfort zone, but it was out of my comfort zone in a different way to normal. It was not that I was pushing myself to a physical limit repeatedly, almost to the point of destruction. I was having to stay, in a way I had to stay within a certain amount of capability because I needed to look after the twins, but I still was right on the edge of what I could, from a strength point of view, what I could do, because I had to put the bike on my back and push the trailer up the steepest bit. So I guess from that point of view, it was really physically challenging. But from a stamina point of view, I had to make sure I always had a bit in the tank just to look after the girls.
Sometimes that's the best way for anybody, though, not just when you've got the responsibility of having children with you. You know, that quote they say, you can't win the race at the start, but you can lose it. And I think that applies to actually life. You can't guarantee that you'll live a long, healthy life. You don't, but you can certainly screw it up early on if you do the wrong things.
Yeah.
And you can do that. And anybody doing any physical challenge can do that. Whereas this approach where you kept enough in the tank to be able to still mother at the same time as doing this, maybe we all should be doing that when we're doing challenges, because then when your bike breaks, when the storm comes in, you've got the thing that gets you through it. You know, you've got that bit inside of you.
And I tell you what, though, it was such a challenge. So everyone at the start, everyone kind of cycles through these streets of St. Gallen, circles this old olive tree. It's amazing. And then everyone spans off in different directions, and it's just very cool, except for normally everyone else spans off at speed, and there was me with the trailer sort of chugging away slowly. And I was off the start line, but actually an hour into the race, and that's only an hour of a kind of 3-day event, I stopped and gave the twins a sit-down breakfast, because my approach was to keep nap times as nap times, meal times as meal times, and they had plenty of opportunities to get out and wiggle and play. This wasn't, I don't want anyone to think that I just kind of shut them up in the trailer and was like, right, that's it. It was very much centred around their routine, their day, and in the bits in between, could I travel a really long way up a lot of hills. But I think the thing I hadn't anticipated, the hardest bit for me, was these repeated stops, because I'm so used to getting my head down and just cracking on and being like, okay, right, suffer through the pain, just push, and almost push to a point where you numb off to all of that. To have to stop, like regather yourself, do kind of like whether it's a nappy change or a feed or whatever, because I was still breastfeeding as well. It was so challenging, and actually it really made me confront my inability to rest, I guess. But it was a good thing, and I definitely got into it the more the race went on.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever considered that part, actually, of how hard it would have been to get going again every time you had to stop.
Yeah.
Because normally you just avoid stopping, so you don't have to deal with that problem.
But don't we all, taking this a little bit broader, don't we all just avoid actually confronting the issue that we maybe struggle to rest or struggle to stop? Is it just not easier sometimes to push on and keep going and just I guess, be in slight denial that stopping is sometimes harder.
That's so true, actually. And also, I think that probably the further you get from it, the moments you might save are the moments you actually were... Because when they're in the trailer, Annie and Flo aren't being interacted with. They're probably having nap time. But when you actually stop, that's the moments where you get to spend actual time with them on the race. And that's the bit that you'll remember as special, that you did it with them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny because you might forget... You'll probably forget a lot of the pedaling and a lot of the bits where you were just zooming along. The bits you might remember when you took them out at the checkpoint, and then they had you had a little cuddle with them, and
definitely it was those moments that really will stick with me for a long time.
Yeah, that's really funny. Obviously, when they grow up, they're gonna hear about this incredible journey that you guys had together, and luckily they're gonna have lots of good content to look back on it too. But obviously you've grown up and with this idea that you needed to push yourself, and how are you going to try and avoid that with them? It's such a difficult thing. I don't, maybe you don't have control over it. I don't know.
I think a lot of it is personality driven, especially for me. A combination of my personality and the fact that I've probably been brought up to maximise every opportunity and to seize the day. I think this is a slight tangent, but both my parents have struggled with their health, and I think that really, like, looking at that made me really want to make the most of every moment, because you never know what's going to happen. And I think that's probably where it's partly come from for me. In terms of Annie and Flo and how I can encourage them to, I guess, listen to their body and have a nice combination of resting and pushing ourselves, I don't necessarily know yet, but I'm hoping that, you know, role models are really important. And if I can... There are some things that are really hard, that I found really hard as a parent to even though they're two and they're probably not fully aware of what I'm doing, there are some things, especially for example around body image, where I know I have to start now, being their role model now. And even if that's hard for me, even if it's putting me in, I guess, like an uncomfortable zone mentally because I don't find it easy, I know that it's going to be worth it if it passes on anything to them.
Yeah, and now that they're absorbing everything, you're right, it almost does start now, because we were just having a conversation the other day about how sometimes people can say things about food around us that maybe make us go, ooh, oh, that makes me feel stressed about food now, or gives us negative thoughts. But and that they'll be like the slightest little comments that somebody have made in conversations. It makes you realise how big an impact all this stuff that's just being said has. Even when I'm around Annie and Flo now, I've realised, I have to stop swearing. I have to actually think about the words I'm saying. And they're little sponges right now. It's wild to think that they could be picking up their view of the world, and we're not even knowing that's what is forming in their brains right now.
I know, I think I love... One thing I'm really loving about being a parent is showing them the world. Yeah. Because everything, oh my gosh, everything is so exciting, whether it's literally a slide in a play park or a pine cone or birds. They spot so much. They're so incredibly observant. And actually, they're really good currently at maxing out on play and then just resting when they need to rest. Yeah. Like, if we look back to what we were like when we were little, maybe we all need a little bit more of that in our lives.
Yeah, exactly. The only reason we're doing this right now is because they're on nap time.
yeah, this is true.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot that could be learnt there. And going back to when you were a kid, do you think that you were looking at role models of that generation that were just work as hard as you can and you'll get something for it and you don't worry about the consequences? Do you think that, because I think definitely the role models, most of them that I had in the generation above us, were just hard work is the only way?
Yeah, I think hard work was definitely... All the role models I can think of when I was little worked very hard, and it was a case of what you put in, you get out. That wasn't to say that you couldn't be lucky, but it was very much like, if you put in enough effort, you will succeed. And then I think coming kind of later in life, looking at my, I guess, like adventure and outdoorsy role models, it was very much when Instagram and social media, like, adventure was newer to those kind of platforms, and it was very much showing the extreme. It was, suffering was completely glamorized, and actually, in a way, it was held like a badge or a trophy as a good thing. And I guess now I think it's changing and it's a bit of a different picture on there, not completely, but I mean, like Type 2 Fun, Sufferfest, Hurt Locker, all these Pain Cave, all these phrases were definitely proud things to say. Whereas now I kind of feel quite differently about that.
Yeah, maybe before social media, you're seeing the tiny 0.1% of people who can have 4 hours of sleep, hammer their body, go to work, be a professional climber at the same time. But the problem is they're the only ones on the TV screen. They're the ones with the most followers on Instagram. So you can't help but end up with this bias that makes you think that everybody should be able to do that, and if you can't, then maybe you're not good enough. So the solution to that surely is to just work harder, drive more, push further.
Yeah, I think especially because a lot of these are not necessarily role models, but characters. They focused on being quite relatable too. So you kind of had this dangerous combination of feeling like that could be you, but only if you tried exceptionally hard and you were willing to tolerate quite a lot of pain.
Yeah.
So I think it comes from only telling maybe 2 bits of the story, and that's kind of the everyday life moments or snapshots and then the top of the mountain. And I think hopefully what we're seeing more of now and with things like this podcast is that you're getting the middle, and the middle isn't necessarily the most interesting bit, but it is where a lot of reality happens.
I think it's also good to see now, because Instagram allows us to see the lives of such a variety of people. We get to see a bit more of those other levels, because I think my experience, and I don't have any scientific backing for this, but I think the 2 most at-risk groups for burnout, overtraining, undereating, getting stuck in these kind of cycles of not looking after yourself are women and the kind of semi-professional, amateur, high-level sports people. And often those 2 things are the same per person. And I think that's because the really high-level amateur, semi-professional athletes, they want to do the same amount of training, the same amount of pushing themselves as the professionals, but their brains don't register this fact that they also have a job, or they also are doing, and they're also doing something else alongside it, and they don't account for that in how hard they're working. I definitely see the burnout, the kind of control behaviors with exercise and eating more in that group almost than the next level up group, where all you have to do is do the exercise or whatever. I don't know what it is about women, especially of our generation, if it's because we are the generation that said no, we can be as good as men, or whether it's because we just are so hard on ourselves and it's something about how we're brought up. I don't know, but I think it's a very high risk group, and especially a female semi-professional athlete, I feel like is the highest risk for all this stuff. And I find that very interesting. But now I think we can see more people like that, and we see all parts of their life and realise it's not that simple. Unless you're a professional athlete, you don't actually just have the time to potentially push yourself to those limits, and then you can't just sleep if you're not sleeping the rest of the day, it's not.
Yeah, I think it's when it comes to women, I guess it's tricky because everyone is different, but I think one thing we do is our values and our purpose is so interwoven with what we choose to do as a hobby. So it's not just a hobby. It's not just, I'm just going climbing, I'm just going running. It is a core part of who we are and how we think about ourselves. So I think the more you're taking that to a higher level, or the more you're doing that, the more it matters. Therefore, the more you're driven to keep pushing yourself in that area.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And because you've done extensive research looking into women in the outdoors, and is this something that you've picked up through that, and what other lessons have you found through that?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that values and self-belief and purpose are so very much interlinked with what women do as a sport or hobby. The other thing is impact on mental well-being, and although outdoor sport and adventure sports is really good for our well-being, the world of adventure and outdoors can attract people who are suffering with poor mental well-being to start. And it's their kind of safe place or haven that they come to deal with those, with maybe a problem or something that was on there before they discovered the outdoors.
Yeah, and it makes sense because outdoor pursuits are an amazing treatment for low mood or poor mental health, but they can become a cause as well if you're not careful about it. And definitely I've experienced that, and I know that a lot of people who are listening will also have had times where maybe you've taken it too far or became too obsessive or that kind of thing.
I think it's like, for me, I absolutely love exercise in the outdoors. It can easily tip into a I must rather than I would like to, or or even worse, like not even must, I should. I think should is worse than must. But it's hard finding that balance of, again, that kind of enough rest for your body. Well, this is what I find hard. Enough rest for your body, but enough exercise or enough outdoor fix for your mind. Because the amount of outdoor fix for my mind would almost be infinite. I'd just keep going and I would never not continue to do what I love doing outside. But my body needs rest.
Yeah.
And there's the realities of life, and there's all kind of like kids to look after, a job to do. You got to eat, you got to sleep. And so I think that's the battle I find hard.
Well, that's one of the things I want as well to talk about with this community is that, we're all coming at this from a different space. Some people, they need, doing exercise, doing physical activities, outdoor activities, that is their rest from maybe they work 100 hours a week in a bank, or maybe they work 70 hours a week as a surgeon, whatever it is. Everybody needs a break from that thing that they are driving and striving for. They need to have something else that's healthy for them. We're coming at it more from the side of, we would spend 100 hours a week physically hammering ourselves and need to have a physical rest from that. But some people are doing the opposite. And I just think it would be amazing if we are able to make more of a community where everybody can use, exercise, healthy outdoor activities to benefit them, but not take it too far and not do too little either. Whatever balance is right, and whatever background you've come from, this can be useful for you. So you might notice our audio has changed a little bit. That's because we were interrupted by Hetty's lovely little girls waking up from their nap and causing a bit of chaos. So we have escaped from the house into my camper van, and we're going to finish off our episode in here. But I think it's pretty appropriate because it just shows how difficult it is to balance everything in life. Hetty, how are you finding, managing to get the bits that you need in around the kids' schedule?
I find juggling work and the kids, and then I guess me and I guess everything I did prior to their arrival, I find that definitely challenging, and I'm still working on it at the minute. During my pregnancy, I was not really able to be active much at all, despite being a huge advocate for getting out and being active during pregnancy. I think how sick I felt and how big I got with the twins just meant I was quite limited physically. So I think my reaction to coming back to work and the outdoors once they're born was quite almost like a knee-jerk reaction of instantly being like, yes, go, what can I do, where can I take them, like what can I fill my time? And so I've kind of definitely become busy on all fronts, which is really good. But now where I'm at is trying to work out how that all fits together. And I guess the one thing I've not found out how to fit in is that kind of all-important rest day. So where I've been sort of refocusing my energy is trying to think, what can I do with the kids that is, say, like taking them outdoors and giving them an absolutely lovely time, but also not in a way that pushes me or is restful for me, which I know is tricky when they're two and they're very excited and they're very enthusiastic, but I think it's all a big work in progress.
And it's difficult because you don't get to schedule it anymore. Everything is now done on their schedule. Even if you wanted to, you couldn't do that thing where you like hammer yourself and then you just have a whole day to chill out, because there's no days off anymore, is there?
No, there's definitely not. I think that's something I'm still getting used to, is the fact that I'm not out there, I'm not scaling mountains, I'm not going on multi-day bikepacking adventures. Yes, I've done Dead Ends and Cake, and I don't want to knock what I am doing, but there's a huge amount that I'm not doing. But the important thing I'm trying to tell myself is yet. because actually from an exhaustion point of view, I'm probably more exhausted now than I was even then. And so it's become incredibly important for me to work out how I can factor in enough time for sort of self-care and the outdoors, and in a way that makes me feel good about myself, because it's very easy not doing a lot of things that I was doing kind of pre-pregnancy to feel like that part's been left behind, whereas in my core I don't believe it's gone. I just believe that I want to make the most of this moment in a different way, and that's by being Annie and Flo's mum and living every moment that we have together currently.
I think that is such a good way to look at it. I think I've really started to look at life like that there's phases of life and different times, and you don't have to have the same priority in all of them. You don't have to be Hetty, the person who rides ridiculously far on her bike in every single phase of life. Life is so full of so many different things. You can have different ones, and like you say, you're never going to get this time again with the girls, so that it's worth that being the main thing right now. You won't mind, I think, when you're back riding your bike again in the future all the time.
I think as well, something I've got used to is like the ebbs and flows on sort of the micro scale in terms of day to day, week to week. I've got used to my energy ebbing and flowing. I guess what I haven't yet learned is it on the big picture. And actually, like we're saying, that there are phases of life. There's phases where I'm going to be more centered around being a mother. There's phases where I'm going to be more centered around my adventure, and there'll be times where those spheres overlap, but they won't always overlap. And that isn't something I've learned yet, but I guess it's a realization I'm coming to.
And a lot of this, I think, is giving in to the fact that we don't have control. Okay, yes, it's an active choice to become a mom, but you don't have a control over whether you get one or two babies, whether they are really active or whether they're really chill or all of this stuff, whether your health plays ball. And so actually being really okay with this phases of life idea, I think, it makes it all a lot easier when stuff comes up. Doesn't mean that it'll all be swimmingly easy, but
And I think like another, I guess, phase people don't talk about is when you're planning a family and you're thinking about having a family and you're trying for a baby. And, I feel so lucky every single day that I've been kind of blessed with two beautiful children. But I remember the trying to conceive phase where people are like, hey, do you want to go do this ultra in June? And you're thinking, oh, well, I really would like to be pregnant in June, but I don't know I don't even know if that's possible.
Yeah.
And actually, that was a really tricky time because I was kind of almost on not enforced rest, but like that weird balance of, yes, I want to plan things in because I don't want to just stop my life. But at the same time, I've got this incredibly important focus almost behind the scenes that means I don't want to go dropping 100 or hundreds of pounds on a race entry or letting my friends down by not being able to suddenly do a big adventure. So I think that's not something I've really heard spoken about much, but that part almost like pre-pregnancy, you're already having to balance life in a new way.
And again, that's a phase where you do have so little control because you have no idea, how long it will take you to get pregnant. Maybe there'll be miscarriages along the way. Maybe it will be really difficult. It might take years. It might take assisted conception. There's so many possibilities in that phase, and there's so little control over how it's going to play out for you. And then in the pregnancy itself, again, there's that. And sometimes I think because, the people can go two ways. One way is to very much accept there's no control over what's happening. And the other way is to then try and cinch control anywhere in life, which is a totally reasonable coping mechanism, but can be very dangerous, where maybe you actually do the opposite and you do too much physically. Maybe you start to be quite controlling about what you eat or how you schedule your life, your work schedule. That's, sometimes we just grasp for control anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of trying to control a little bit too much in my life. I think for me, order and knowing what's going to happen, and I guess I joke. I'm known for something called planned spontaneity, which is, the least spontaneous way of being spontaneous. But I like to think that I can be spontaneous, but I can only be spontaneous if it's incredibly planned. So I think that probably gives you a bit of a sense of how I feel about control. I'm definitely someone that would plan something with a spreadsheet to within an inch of its life. So when something is totally beyond my control, I do feel quite lost, and I can turn to, I guess, the less healthy ways of dealing with that. Certainly becoming a parent and the journey to get there taught me a lot about letting go of control and embracing failure, definitely.
I think we're very similar like that, and it's probably a lot of what our friendship is based on. So we've talked a little bit about how rest is useful in different ways for different people, and it means such different things to people. And we have touched on the fact that for you, it physical exertion is a great mental rest. But how do you rest physically? Obviously, that'll probably have two completely different answers pre-motherhood and now.
I think pre-motherhood, I don't think I did. I think my physical rest was doing my work. I look back, I don't think it was particularly healthy. I think post-motherhood, to start with, or quite early on, the wheels completely fell off for me. I learnt that all my coping mechanisms pre-pregnancy didn't really exist with two babies. They weren't, you can't feel like particularly like having a bad day with your mental health and go on a 60k cycle. When you've got 2-3-month-old babies and you're moving house, that's not, or even without the house move, that's not possible. So I think what I'm trying to carve out for myself or do now is a lot more walking. It's a lot more just appreciation of nature as a whole. I know it sounds cheesy, but literally listen to the sounds, pay attention to all the senses. Like, I'm not good at it, and I kind of sometimes, especially when I've got a day where I'm particularly anxious, I will rush past doing all those things because I don't want to connect with my body. I don't want to be in my own head. I just would like to just completely detach from all of that. But I'm learning that the more I practice this and the more I kind of do and naturally share that with Annie and Flo, it's kind of fits perfectly with them, because I'm like, oh, can you do this? Can you smell the rain that's just the grass and the rain? Can you see the bird over there? It's actually helping me, but a natural part of, I guess, helping them and their development too.
That's so interesting. At what point in your life did you ever start to think, how rest could be useful with it, physically or sometimes mentally? At any point, obviously, when you were a teenager, you were a competitive and really good horse rider. When you were training your horse, was there ever any incorporation of physical rest into that? And did you ever think about that for yourself?
I've literally never put those things together till now. The fact that I rode to quite a high level competitively on my horse, would always make sure without fail that he had his rest days, but completely failed to have any myself. I think I looked at those days as just like opportunities to do a million other things.
Isn't that so wild? What are our brains doing?
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to animals, we mentioned earlier that it's easy to tell your friends to do one thing and not do it yourself. I think when it comes to us looking after animals, whether you've got a dog, whether you ride horses, whatever it is, I think we're so good at looking after, or with kids as well, we're so good at looking after other people and things, but we're very bad at doing it ourselves.
I wonder if that's also part of why women are a little bit more at risk, because as much as I love to try and avoid any stereotype of being a woman and like to pretend to myself that there is no basis but for there being a stereotype, there is some basis, and there are some inbuilt biological things, and I wonder if we are just inbuilt biologically to care and look after before doing that for ourselves.
That's a really interesting point. I do wonder that, because I think it's so easy to put someone else or something else before yourself. Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's maybe not much there. I don't know if there might be some men who say that they feel exactly the same way, but I definitely think when I'm speaking to male friends, it seems like that's less of an issue, maybe. I also think sometimes some of my male friends, they're better at just like, if they were just given a plan and it just says, yeah, here's your rest day, or they are told this is the way to do it scientifically, there should be a rest day. that seems an easier concept for them, whereas it's like we're eating ourselves up. I used to find when I was training really high level running, I would like literally eat myself up mentally if I took a rest day sometimes, to the point where at some point in the day I'd probably crack and go out and do something. Even though is what I had been told to do by coaches who said this is going to be beneficial for you. I don't know where that came from. Have you ever felt eaten up like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think I really struggle with the concept. I know that you need rest to improve when it comes to training, and I know that it's scientifically required, but I just can't seem to get my head around it. I can't seem to, I guess if I'm being honest, it's about feeling like I deserve the rest sometimes. I guess sometimes I don't feel like I deserve a rest. I feel like I should just keep going, because if I don't keep trying, then I'm not going to get better.
Mm. And were there any figures in your life, like for me, there were quite a lot of coaches who maybe were of the generation where they believed that that was really the best way. Um, were there any figures who were saying to you, no, Hetty, work harder, you're not performing quite at the level, just work harder and you will? Or was it always coming from you?
I think it was mainly internal, and like I said before, just like that drive from seeing um both my parents go through various health issues definitely created this internal push to seize every moment. Um yeah, I think it's mainly internal, but there probably have been a few along the way.
Hmm. Has there been any adventures that you've had where, because it was just a bit more adventurous, it actually wasn't maybe quite as challenging? I was trying to think of, you went skiing in, was it Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan?
Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan. I was thinking of that, and I was like, I'm sure that there was lots of physically challenging bits to that, but I imagine that the adventure of it and the logistics meant that you couldn't actually rinse yourself all day every day.
Completely. So I was lucky enough to go skiing in Kazakhstan, a place called East Pole, which was absolutely incredible, like amazing powder, just the most beautiful remote setting to go and ski tour. And very much there we had to ski within our physical limits and not go all out, because I think we were sort of 7 hours from any sort of help of any kind. So you can't really be messing around in those circumstances. And that was an incredible trip and pushed me in a gentle way, but a really great way. It was, yeah, particularly special place to be.
And did it, after that trip, I bet you felt pretty good.
Yeah.
But did anything click in your head that maybe there was something there, something to learn there?
I think possibly not, because so we were ski touring and it was because no one else was there and there was incredible powder, but it meant that putting all the skin tracks in, so as you went up the mountain, was incredibly hard work physically if you were on the front. So I think I probably was ticking that box of physical exertion. And I think it's only when I've been pulled almost to the extreme that I've realised that I need rest. Like I need the equivalent of being slapped in the face with it to realise it's not been a subtle realisation.
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen you, as well as all the physical challenges, I've seen you work insane hours running your own business, in being involved in organising a human-powered relay all the way from Scotland to Egypt, these kind of mental things that you've done in your job, organising a women's Tridfest, all of this stuff is work that has required you to throw yourself so full in. In our friendship, you've been aware of the fact that after those periods, you were pretty wrecked. But even despite acknowledging that, I'm not sure you were able to do them in a more sustainable way.
Yeah, I think my work was definitely, we've talked a lot about physical adventure and outdoor and being kind of active outdoors, but my work is a mirror of that. And it really has only been post-pregnancy that I have really realised the value of rest. Maybe it's the sleepless nights, but I also think it's kind of that real confrontation of you really have to think about how you use your time.
Yeah. And because if you didn't, you wouldn't be getting any rest at all.
No, and I think you can't. If you want to get something done, I think you can't not plan to an extent, or at least I can't not plan. I can't not plan.
Okay. Now, another thing I wanted to touch on a little bit, because I'm just generally interested, I think because I was such a skeptic before, is that we have tried a bit of cold dipping together. I honestly thought that I would never, ever try that. I thought that is a load of nonsense. Why would you ever do that? How does that work for you?
So cold dipping came about at a time where I had very, very little time in the day. I couldn't fit in. I was running huge distances, and I couldn't fit in kind of like, a 20-mile run every time I felt a bit under, subpar. So me and a friend Jen, we went to our local river and we started trying to get in. And I don't really know what started it, but it was just quite literally a toe dip right at the beginning. At this point in time, I was like, I hate cold water. I have this weird thing where like I don't really like sort of things in the water beneath me. That's kind of freaks me out a bit. And we just built up from there, and I suddenly, not suddenly, but I gradually realised that it was really helping my mental well-being, and that I was getting the same buzz off a 5-minute cold dip as I was a 30k ride.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Now there's lots of actual science to back up the physical and mental health benefits of it, but it's just a wild concept, is that anybody would want to go and get in cold water. But yeah, if you're listening and you're a real skeptic, give it a shot because it makes you feel good. And it actually is a really good mental reset. Do you find it helps quieten the mind, or what are the actual sort of on the day benefits for your brain?
I think for me, I can't think about anything else other than what I'm doing in that moment, because you have to be so aware, well, you are so aware of your body and you're so aware of your breath. And you literally have to almost put yourself into almost a meditative. And believe me, I'm not someone that's good at meditation. I'm really bad at yoga. I just can't seem to ever switch into that headspace where I'm like Zen. But this kind of forces you in the moment to be mindful and to really connect with your whole body to get in, especially when it's really cold, because you really can't just jump in. And please, if you're listening and want to give this a go, please don't just jump in. There's a lot behind being safe in cold water. And I think I was quite lucky, even though I was naive to what I was doing. I naturally took the approach of very gingerly and gently getting in, and always sort of underplaying the amount of time I was in the water rather than overplaying it. But I think it's that meditative state that makes your mind quiet, and then when you get out, you have this euphoria of just, I did it. But also, I think there's a rush of happiness.
It's funny, isn't it? And, related to the cold dipping, we've been doing that with our other friend Jess. And I think, and we've already a few times in this episode acknowledged that our friendship's been really beneficial for our battles with overworking and rest. But it's amazing what it does when you have have people who have your back. As soon as we were able to open up and say, oh, I actually do really struggle to be nice to myself sometimes. And like you said, we'll have message conversations where one of us will message and say, I'm so tired today, I'm actually going to do nothing. And what we're wanting from each other is the other two to say, good idea, you should definitely do that. And we're so lucky to have had that healthy friendship. And we're very lucky because we got it through a community-based sort of sports group. And that brings me back around to this whole idea that I have about outdoors exercise stuff needing community bases to form these really healthy friendships, relationships, and we can all encourage each other to live this life where we're not putting too much pressure on ourselves, where it is okay to say, I need to stop today, or even to say, I can't handle doing this extra thing. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to help you with whatever it is somebody is asking you to do. I think we can help each other a lot in this, and I want to build more than just a podcast here. I want to build a community of people who are saying to each other, it's okay to take a rest day. And we've seen just in our small community in what we have, it's called the Peak Gravel Gang. It's a cycling community in the Peak District, that nurture and looking after people works in all ways. It works for the person who needs the mental health break by coming for a ride but is stuck in a rut and doesn't feel able to come, then the community gets them out and gets them coming, and they continue on. And sometimes those people even then start doing that for other people, and that, when it comes full circle, it looks beautiful. But it also works when you're where we're so obsessed with working so hard physically, and we need that little break, and we need to do something more relaxed. I know I've used the gravel gang to say, I've gone for a ride today, but it was actually really relaxed. I was there to see other people. I was there to look at the beautiful countryside, and I was there just to enjoy the riding. I wasn't looking at numbers. I didn't look at my heart rate. I wasn't checking what my strain score was for the day, what impact it had on me. Because and that's so healthy to step into that from that end as well. I really hope that more and more we can have more healthy outdoors and adventure and sporting communities like that, between the point where at school you have some clubs and stuff, and then some people carry on with elite or high level amateur sport, and then you're kind of left with not much else. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, there's so much here. I think community is so important. I think community makes us feel like we belong and we're part of something, and it gives us that kind of base to come back to, rely on, check in with. As you said, it's been gravel gang, and our friendship has been so important to me, especially over the past few years, in learning to rest and to juggle and to balance things. And I think there isn't much out there necessarily there is an increasing amount, but not much, that is different to the traditional club. And I think that's what we need. We need these communities. I also think if I could see one thing as like the first baby step, whatever it is, my first baby step would be like, let's remove the apology. Let's not say sorry for actually looking after ourselves. And that's a slight side note, but it'd be the first thing. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, don't have that community yet, hopefully we're going to create it. But what's one thing you can do right now, and that is to take away the apology, to that step that you're doing to look after yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that was the very, very first few weeks of our friendship, was basically me, you, and Jess sort of apologising to each other because maybe we hadn't replied to a message quick enough, or, oh, actually, I'm not free that day to go for a run. I'm so sorry. Like, that was not our fault. Or I'm actually on a night shift that day, so I won't be able to run. But I am so sorry.
I torn my ankle, but I am really sorry.
Yeah, but there was no need for any of those apologies. You got to look after yourself a bit. Yeah, exactly. So I think this really ties up our kind of episode and our journey together through rest days and exploring this all really nicely.
Thank you for listening to Hetty's episode of the podcast. I'm sure you will agree she was an amazing guest. Hetty has experienced so much in her life, probably what it would take most people multiple lifetimes to experience. Her wisdom really comes through. This is going to be the final episode before a short mid-season Christmas break. The next episode should be coming roughly the 13th of January. To keep up to date with things, follow us on Instagram @RestDaysCommunity or check out the website restdayscommunity.com. See you in the new year.